Hey everyone, this is Angela Johnson, and you're listening to the Warrior Razor Podcast.
Each week, my mom will talk about real stories and apply biblical truth to everyday life. She'll tell about her personal journey, and sometimes she'll invite other warrior raisers to share too.
Anyone, not just moms, can be part of the conversation.
Good morning, warriors. Time to start your day. Keep your head up, marching on. Don't let nothing stand in your way. Don't let nobody tear you down. You got to proudly wear your crown. 'Cause you're a warrior, warrior, warrior.
Hey Warrior Raisers, good to be with you on the show today. We're going to be picking up our content with Biblical Warrior Raisers, and then I promise to get some interviews coming down the pipeline. Been traveling a lot and speaking at different locations, so I've got some time at home. And even last night I was thinking about what to share with you guys, and God just kind of gave me this little idea, and it all stems from a recent conversation that I had with one of my really good friends. But I also wanted to tell you that after you either listen online or watch online, wherever you're hearing the podcast today, go on to warriorrazor.com. That's the ministry page. And I will have a free downloadable one sheet that you can use as a supplement to our time together. So it's like a little devotional. There's a synopsis of the learning, and then there's some interaction with questions and just some thought-provoking ideas to kind of reinforce and supplement the learning today. I don't know about you, but I like to learn in different formats. So whether it's listening auditorily or watching something or kinesthetically having that hands-on access to learning, I want to give you as many resources as possible. So go on, and today's lesson will be, there will be a resource that you can download and take with you. Keep it in your Bible study journal, wherever. Just, it's nice to have as a resource. But today's lesson is called Making Pearls, and we're going to be talking about Hannah. We're going to be in the Old Testament in 1 Samuel. And I know I've mentioned Hannah on here early on with the podcast series, specifically talking about how Hannah had been barren, how she had prayed and asked for a son specifically, just because we know that sons were the legacy of women in the family at that time in biblical, in antiquity. So we know this of Hannah, but where I taught before was that God had granted her a son and that she gave him back, because the word in Hebrew talks about that the Lord lends our children to us, or that he lent Samuel, her son, to Hannah so that she gives him back to the Lord. And so that's most often when we hear Hannah's story, that's kind of like the highlighted version of who she is and how she's most often remembered. But I'm going to talk to you about a little different part about her story. And the reason that I even thought about this is I was walking in my neighborhood with my really good friend Erica. She is just an amazing warrior for the kingdom, and I've been able to watch her just journey with God and grow in her relationship with the Lord. And I'm going to have her on the show here soon. But we were walking around the block, walking our dogs, and she was telling me the woes of her most recent job situation, where she was just having some trouble with the situation at work. And this story came to my remembrance, and I shared it with her. And I thought, I don't know if a lot of people know this version, so let me share with you the situation that Hannah was going through. And as we do on the show, we're going to read, and then we're going to take some breaks and segue into a real life application. So we're finding ourselves in 1 Samuel chapters 1 and 2, and we find ourselves in a place more commonly known as Ramah. So it's like a $10 word here if you're reading along with me. But there was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of the hill country, Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph. and Ephrathites. Okay, lots of words and genealogy and lineage. So we know that this guy was very important in the terms of lineage and hierarchy. But he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah. So she's mentioned first, so we know she is likely the first wife. And the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Okay, so as we do, we look into the understanding of the names so we can get the full context of how we are seeing these women and the story, to get the backstory a little bit more in depth. So I just want to tell you, our key verse here is going to be 1 Samuel 6, so we're going to get to that here in a minute. But Hannah, she's the first wife, as we mentioned, and she was the favored wife, and her name means favor or grace, or favored or graciousness. Now Peninnah, that she was the second wife of Elkanah, and her name is derived from a word that means corals. That's most commonly how it's known, but it's also known as jewels or pearls. Okay, so again, Peninnah had children, but Hannah was barren. Okay, let's pick back up in here in verse 3. Now this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. So this Elkanah guy, the husband, he's a God-fearing man, although he did have 2 wives. But still, he's a God-fearing man. He's doing his act of worship and sacrifice to the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. So Peninnah's got a lot of kiddos here. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. I think that when we study patterns, biblical patterns, this is one that we see in Old Testament, with the Lord closing wombs, the favored wife being barren, there being rivalry. And so this here is another story that kind of mirrors that same concept. And then verse 6, our key verse for this learning. And her rival used to provoke her grievously, to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. I like the amplified version of this particular scripture, because it said Hannah's rival, who's Peninnah, provoked her bitterly to irritate and embarrass her because the Lord had left her childless. I mean, how rotten. Peninnah, you nasty thing, you, given Hannah all this grief because you have children and she doesn't. It's so funny what we lord over people, or what we use to make ourselves feel better. But it was the culture in the day, and children made one of value, and particularly sons. And Peninnah had children and particularly had sons, and Hannah had none. And the fact that Elkanah was giving a double portion to Hannah, it was probably very known that she was the favored, but she was also the first wife, so she probably should have been the favored. Okay, so that's verse 6. Her rival used to provoke her, or provoke her bitterly, to irritate and embarrass her. Okay, going on here. As often, so she goes up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her, always provoking. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? I mean, he really loved her, and he didn't want her to be sad or sorrowful. I don't know, women, if you're listening, if your husband's just like cannot stand to watch you cry, or your boyfriend just like cannot handle watching you cry. I think that was where Elkanah was here. He says, am I not more to you than 10 sons? Verse 9, after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli, the priest, was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. And she was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow. Okay, we know about vows. They were binding, and they were very, very important. People didn't break vows back then. They swore to their own hurt and change not. Like that's in the Psalms. So they stuck to what they said. And it says, she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son. So she prayed a very specific prayer. God's honored by bold prayers, and he is not intimidated by our specific prayers. So rather than saying, oh God, just let me have a child, no, she prayed specifically for God to look upon her, to remember her, to not forget her, and then to give her a son. And then she says, and then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. So that was when she was talking about giving him back to the Lord in service. And no razor shall touch his head. That's another side note there you can look into later if you want to understand the full meaning of that. Then on verse 12, as she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart. Only her lips moved and her voice was not heard. So she was praying prayers from within her heart, but her lips were outwardly making the signs of the words, but no audible sound was coming out from her prayer. Therefore, Eli took her to be a drunken woman. He sees her praying these prayers and assumes that she's lost her mind or she's drunk. So he makes an assumption. And Eli said to her, how long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, no, my Lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman. For all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him. And she said, let your servant find favor in your eyes. Then the woman went her way and ate. So she finally eats. And her face was no longer sad. They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife. That word knew means to be intimate with her. And the Lord remembered her. That's exactly what she prayed. Don't forget me. Remember your servant. And he remembered her. And in due time, perfect time, right? In due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. Now, I encourage you to go on and read, and then in Hannah's song is in chapter 2, where she gives the Lord praise and thanks, and specifically for Samuel 2:2. I love this verse. She said, no one is holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. She gives God all the glory for the answering of her prayer. But so let's pause here because I want to just pick up a little bit here. So Hannah, her name means favor and grace, right? But Peninnah, her name, we talked about meaning corals, jewels, or pearls. And if you know anything about how pearls are made, they are caused by a natural protective agent within an oyster, usually more commonly an oyster, by like a grain of sand. And what happens is over time, the oyster will produce this protective barrier, and eventually a pearl is made. But it has to come from the first thing being an irritation or something to cause provocation or poking, just annoyance, right? And so when my friend was talking to me about this situation at work, she was being constantly provoked and irritated, and not even sometimes with the person that was causing this for her, but in her own mind, she was just allowing it just to irritate her and aggravate her. And so we know that these women, there's a contentious relationship between them. And just like a grain of sand in an oyster, Peninnah was this constant irritation to Hannah. But over time, that friction would eventually produce a beautiful pearl. Yes, Hannah had a saddened heart. She was distressed and vexed and was weeping bitterly. Like this was just really aching on her heart. But although she was barren, she still believed. And although she was childless, she was not prayerless. And so sometimes I think when we have these situations going on in our life, we cannot allow them to take away our prayer. We cannot allow the irritations of this world to cause a barrier for our conversation with God, because He wants to know it all. Hannah prayed very specifically, and God is honored by those prayers. He is not intimidated by our asks or our wants or our needs, because guess what? He already knows them. He already knows what we need before we even can verbalize it. She did not even utter a word out loud, and God heard her heart. That's how intimately He knows us. So you know what else is interesting? Even though this Peninnah girl was just probably nasty and just this irritating, just constant banter between the two of them, Hannah never prayed Peninnah away. Hannah never prayed that Peninnah would suffer grief or sorrow or get hers or get her comeuppance. Hannah never prayed that prayer. Hannah prayed her own pain away. Hannah prayed away the source of her pain, and that was her childlessness. It was her barrenness. And so when she made it about her, she didn't make it or turn it on somebody else and be like, God, I can't get through this because you have this situation here in my life. So that's a good reminder that when we're going through something, we can offer up those silent requests to the Lord. He sees us, He hears us, He knows us. And when Hannah emptied out her heart to God, when she just poured it all out there before Him, kept nothing hidden from God, He filled up her womb and caused her to get pregnant with the very thing that she asked for, a son. And sometimes I think God in His sovereignty, He allows us to experience suffering. Sometimes we do things that can cause our sufferings by the result of our own actions, but sometimes He allows us, He's sovereign, He allows us to experience suffering. In Luke, the disciples see a blind man on the road and they say, Lord, Master, why is this man blind? Or was it something that he did? Or was it something that his parents did? And Jesus said, no, nothing that he did. It was just so that my glory might be displayed in him. And he ends up getting healed and testifying of that. So sometimes we go through suffering, we go through moments of sorrow, and God allows it because He wants us to draw near to Him. And at first, we might not be able to see any beauty in that suffering. We might not just be able to see any goodness to come from our sorrow or our pain. But God, because He is so powerful, omniscient, He's already in our tomorrows. He's already been there. He sees the beautiful becoming that comes from our suffering. And He can see a beautiful, priceless pearl being created in that friction, in that tension point. So I think that it's a good reminder to us that don't pray away the friction sometimes. Maybe ask the Lord, God, what is the purpose in this pain? What is a lesson that I need to lean into? Because on the other side of that, there might be something just really beautiful and priceless that I never would have experienced had I not gone through this irritation or this friction or this suffering point. And on the end of that story, you can be like Hannah too and just say, there is no God like our God. There is no rock like Jehovah. He is mighty, and He hears us and He sees us and He knows right where we are at our point of need. So I just pray that this little lesson just encourages you right where you are, and reminder that those Peninnahs in life, there are purpose in their presence, their irritation, or their annoyance, and that God can make something beautiful and priceless, and a beautiful pearl can come out of all of that irritation. So be encouraged and go online, and if you want, go ahead and download that free resource for you. It's available, and go ahead and remember, you're making some pearls here, sister. You're making some pearls here, mama. And to all of my fellow warrior raisers, aim those arrows well.
Hi, this is Elliot Johnson. Thank you for listening to the Warrior Raiser podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to support my mom's show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.